let's shift out of politics, because I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
And I guess the best way to do that really is to first talk about your own personal journey.
Yeah.
You were once an atheist. You are no longer an atheist.
That's right. I am now a Christian. I was once a secular Jew, I would say is the way to put it. Yeah.
So born Jewish, not particularly religious, so you were
But raised in the tradition, but kind of without God, you know, like taught, I was bar mitzvahed and all this stuff, and but my parents really didn't believe in anything. You know?
That does seem to sort of be modern Jewish, or at
Yes.
least American Jewish thought. It's not very religious, but it's cultural or something.
I always say, if you really want to destroy the Jews, just leave them alone, because they'll go off on their own. But it's
because they'll all assimilate.
Yeah, they'll
whatever.
assimilate.
Yeah. So so you were secular Jewish, then became an atheist around what age?
Well, I would say I was an agnostic, a practicing atheist, but most of my life I was an agnostic. There was one short period when I became an atheist and then realized that made no sense. And that actually started me back on the other road.
So what was the no sense part? Or what was the agnostic part? Or were you, because you were born secular, or your family was secular, it was just...
What happened was I was bar mitzvahed, and I felt that I didn't want to be. I felt that I didn't believe in what I was saying. And it was an offense to my sense of myself to stand up in front of family and friends and say these words that I did not believe. And I talk about in the book that I received all this gelt, all these gifts for my bar mitzvah, thousands of dollars worth of them, and I put them in this leather box. And at first I was thrilled. You know, here I was 13, I had all this wealth, and over the course of about 6 months, it started to turn. I started to think, this is ill-gotten gains. I lied to get this money, and I waited till everybody went to bed in my house, and I crept outside and I threw the box away.
Really?
And yes, and that was meant to be the end of my religious life. I thought, who wants to feel like this? It's awful, But I didn't feel like I had to make a decision.
You didn't buy one nice thing for yourself, like a bike? You're 13, not even just
I know, I'd like to go back.
One little parting gift.
I threw it all away.
Wow.
And
that's principled. I mean, that's how you know someone's principled.
Well, it didn't occur to me till many, many years later that it must have been important to me to tell the truth about God. That alone made me realize that that the question was more important to me than I kind of admitted to myself. I just thought, well, forget about it. So I call myself an agnostic because I was a practicing atheist, but I just thought, well, who knows? What difference does it make to me, since it has no effect on the world around me.
Yeah.
I became an atheist. What happened, I've lived two lives. I mean, I talk about this in the book. Until the age of 28, I was out of my mind. And at the age of 28, I cracked up. And I went to a psychiatrist, and he cured me. I mean, it was so dramatic that I always think of this Onion headline, "Psychiatrist cures patient." I'm that guy.
Yeah. You're the one guy.
I'm the one guy that psychiatry.
You didn't want to send Woody Allen to this guy.
He's the typical psychiatric patient. 100 years, and then he marries his stepdaughter.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, nobody's perfect, right?
Yeah.
But I was cured. I went from being absolutely miserable and unable to act to being a happy, really joyful person who became successful in my career and was doing exactly what I wanted, had a wonderful family and all this stuff. That was the point when I felt, out of personal integrity, I had to become an atheist because Freud was an atheist. And it was a kind of semi-Freudian...
Freud also born Jewish.
Yes.
Atheist,
but he was a virulent atheist. He really insisted that that religion was just a neurosis. Plus, as I began to realize through certain spiritual experiences that there was a spiritual side to life, I took up Zen, and I had that kind of Zen experience where everything sort of became like, life is an illusion, and all was clear. And I just thought, this is leading me to atheism. And so I became philosophically an atheist. I didn't really change emotionally because I already was not caring about the whole thing, And I started to read atheist works. And one day I read the Marquis de Sade. And the Marquis de Sade makes an argument for atheism that is the only, as I would read these atheists, I would think, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't really make sense. When you follow these atheists down the road, it really doesn't make sense. They sound like they're saying rational stuff, and then you go like, wait, that's not working. The Marquis de Sade worked all the way. He made perfect sense. If there is no God, there can be no morality. If there is no morality, do what nature tells you to do. What nature tells you to do is have pleasure at other people's expense. What difference does it make? Why shouldn't you have pleasure at other people's expense? And that's what he took pleasure in. I thought that's the first atheist philosophy I've ever heard that makes sense from A to Z. That makes sense. And as a leap of faith, I thought, I can't go there. That's hell to me. To live taking pleasure off other people's suffering. I know that's wrong. I know it's wrong. I don't care if they say it's right. I don't care if everybody else on earth says it's right. I don't care if everybody on earth says it's right. It's still wrong. And that's the only leap of faith I ever took. That's the only part of my religion that's faith. Everything else is based on that premise.
So, okay, so let me try to, I'm going to push back a little bit, but also try to extrapolate some of this stuff. So how, if it's all based in morality, and you can't, then aren't there many atheists out there that are extremely happy people in perfectly moral relationships that only put good out there and all of those?
Absolutely, it has nothing to do with that.
So then what am I missing?
Their philosophy doesn't make any sense. See, most of us live with philosophies that don't make any sense. And one of the quirks of my personality, which is kind of what this book is about, is that I want what I say to be exact. You'll see people all the time who say, there's no morality. It's your opinion versus my opinion. Then they go home and they treat their children well and they don't cheat on their wives. And if you question them, they might say some cynical thing, but that's not true. That's not the way. They're not speaking the truth of their lives. They're not speaking the truth of their lives. If they did, they would have to start thinking, well, where does this morality come from? How do I know it? Why do I know that it's right not to cheat on my wife? Why do I know that that's the right thing? That because I gave my word, I won't do it anymore? Why do I know that my word should reflect my actions? Then most people just don't think about it. They just don't think about it. So they can be perfectly decent, but they're living in a world that religion made to some degree.
But why does that matter, I suppose? If, you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, if I was sitting here with someone who lived their life as authentically and positively and as true as you live yours, but without the philosophical jump that you took there, or the spiritual jump, I suppose, really the leap of faith that you took, ultimately you're not arguing that it would make a difference. It makes a difference for you, I suppose.
No,
right?
wait.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a difference to you and me. We can still have a beer and be friends, and you're a good guy, and I know I can trust you, and that's great. That's wonderful. So it doesn't make a difference there. It makes a difference in the broader sphere, because when people come and argue that you should have a safe space, when people come and argue that you should be able to tell that guy not to say what he wants to say, when people come and argue that they should take your freedom away, you don't know why they're wrong. You don't have a philosophy that goes down to the ground. They can always out-argue you. But what if he does this? But what if this happens? But what if if we don't force the guy to wear seatbelts, he'll die, and then his mother will be sad. And they can make all these surface arguments, and you don't know what you believe and why you believe it. You don't know why the founders said you are endowed by your creator with certain inalienable rights. Once you stop believing that, then Barack Obama is in charge of your rights. And if your philosophy doesn't work down to the ground, when these guys come along with their arguments, which are frequently very good sounding, you start to lose the things that matter. Anything you have in life can't be judged until you know what it's for. Is that a good glass or a bad glass? Well, if it's there to hold water, it's doing a pretty good job. That's the thing. Right. You can't really know what is good for you until you know what you're for and what your purpose is. And so while you're right, you're absolutely right. It makes no difference whether a person is a good person or a great person. You can be a great atheist, a person that I would love, and follow and, elect and all these things. But when the argument comes down to take people's freedom away, if the underlying beliefs aren't sound, those arguments will work.
Why couldn't the underlying belief be that there's goodness in man, so to speak, that it comes from you, not necessarily from your creator, but there's something innate within us that would allow you to always stand up for freedom, would always allow you to stand up for liberty, free speech, all of those things that you would be concerned they could come get you for.
Right.
Couldn't you make the same arguments that you would make against that without the faith part?
Not really. I mean, you could say that that's true, and you'd be right. You would say that it's true and you'd be right, but it doesn't make full sense, because when you say that something is morally better than something else, it means that it is closer to an absolute moral good. If nothing is good, if there's no such thing as a good, then you can't be more good than something else, right? Think of it as a line, right? If there's no good and bad, then you can't be on that line. And ultimate moral good, just by logic but just by logic, is going to have certain qualities. It's going to have to be conscious, because goodness is always a conscious choice. A hurricane isn't bad because it kills people.
Wait, I thought hurricanes were because of gay sex? No?
What? No.
We're listening too much 700.
Yeah,
Club,
I think you may have gone beyond my expertise. But a lightning strike isn't bad because it kills somebody, because it has no choice. So an ultimate good is going to have to be rational. It's going to have to be a consciousness. And then you start to get to the point of God. And the other thing about that God is he's going to have to look something like you. There's going to have to be some kind of connection, because you know what he knows. You know which direction he's in. You have a connection to him. So that thing that you said is true. We do have an innate consciousness, that Kant said, the starry sky above and the moral law within. We do have that. But it implies a God. It implies an absolute good.
So how does Christianity fit into this for you?
Well, Christianity fits into it in the following way, that if there is an ultimate moral good, which is a God, and if we know where he is, then the line about him making us in his image starts to make perfect sense. And now you have to start to think about this. I always hear these thinkers, and these are guys I love reading, like Steven Pinker. I love reading his stuff, but he's always talking about the ghost in the machine. And I keep thinking, like, who believes in a ghost in a machine? That's if that's your argument, that's who you're arguing with, people who believe that there's a ghost in your machine. No, that's not the way it works.
It's a little hyperbole. I think it's a little, yeah.
We know that the world is not material because we have ideas, right? There's no such thing as 2 + 2 = 4. And yet it's true, right? The words that we speak, that idea doesn't come into being until we speak it, until we think it. But it's not the thing, it's not the brain waves, it's not the words, it's something else. But it only exists in life when we speak it, when we think it, okay? That's the spirit. The flesh is language. The flesh is a language for speaking the spirit. That's what it is. It's not like, there's not a ghost in a machine. We are the language of the spirit, that's what it is. Once you start to think about it like that, you start to see, like, yeah, it kind of makes sense that at some point along the line, those two things would converge, that spirit and that flesh, and that you would have a word that was made flesh. You would have the word of God that was made flesh. It starts to make sense. Now look, I don't insist that people believe in this. All I would say is that if you start to think it through, what happened to me was not so much that I thought, yes, this must be it. What happened was everything else that I believed was explained by the Gospels.
What was the age that kicked in?
I was close to 50.
So that was close to 50.
Yeah.
So when you had the awakening of the self at 28, where you were fixed,
yes.
as you described
yes.
it, by therapy, what caused you to need that 22 years later?
That's such a great question, because I'm such a stubborn, ornery cuss, that the idea of believing in God when I was in trouble, when I needed him, when, I just thought, well, that's just a crutch. That's just a crutch. So it was only when I felt sane, when I could trust my own perceptions. Because one of the things we talk about all the time is subjectivity. People say, oh, well, you just feel that that's moral, so that's not real. But I fell in love when I was 20, and I'm still in love with the same person. So clearly something that I perceived subjectively had an outward truth, right? So before I felt that I could trust my subjectivity, I had to feel I was sane. And it really took me 10 years from the point when I was cured to say, you know what? Now, first of all, I became educated during that time. I read all these books. And secondly, I felt like, oh, when I feel something, when I see something, and I'm confirmed by logic, it's real. When I think I love my wife, and then I see, like, 40 years later, I'm still crazy about her, that's real. I'm perceiving something real.
And she loved the broken one and the fixed one and the learning one.
And she's stuck with that, that's a heroic thing. That's real love. And so that was part of it. I needed to be joyful before I could accept God, because I didn't want to take on, because I didn't trust myself.
Yeah.
if it was helping me in some way. Yeah.
What do you think? Because I know that a lot of my audience obviously is atheist, and I want to bring on more people of faith. By the way, in general, it's just so happened that a lot of the people that I'm interested in talking to happen to be atheists. But I'm thoroughly enjoying this. And but I know a certain amount of people are going to say, "Well, Dave's not pushing back enough on this or that."
Please.
But my version of atheism would be that you've laid out a case that works for you, and if that leap of faith was necessary for you, I would have to be some sort of pompous jackass to try to deconvince you, is that a word? Unconvince you, or just to change what you think has clearly worked for you. So this is a case where I think atheists in general could be a little more tolerant of the other.
Again,
because I don't think any of the principles that you live by are not things that atheists wouldn't be down with.
But see,
from what I can gather.
But I don't think that their arguments make sense. And by the way, I get nothing out of convince you. I get green stamps in heaven, I guess.
We could do this again. We'll do this again next year. See where we're at.
But I have to say that when I listen to the guys who are talking about, there's a great push to look at human beings as material. I mean, if you even listen to the way people speak, they say, "I had an adrenaline rush." It's like, why don't you just say you got excited? Your adrenaline didn't cause you to be excited. Your excitement caused your adrenaline to move. That's because you are an expression of a spirit. That's, it's not the other way around. And therefore, when people get depressed, they invented these wonderful drugs that if you have a chemical imbalance, they may fix your imbalance. Now, that's how they invented them.
Yeah.
Now they say to you, well, if you've been, depressed for 2 weeks, you should take these drugs. And my feeling is, if you haven't been depressed for 2 weeks, you're not paying attention. Right. It's like you should take. If you haven't been depressed, you should take drugs.
Yeah.
I mean,
but isn't that the human condition? I mean, depression and all these things that they're drugging us to run from are the things that make us human.
But if you are a materialist, if you are an atheist, if you believe that there is no spirit, why are you making that argument? Why not just take the drug and make yourself happier?
Because it's incumbent on me to find some happiness here.
Why?
I think you have to, I think I could quote, I think Larry David took this originally from somebody else, but the end of Anything Goes, Anything Works, one of his movies a couple of years ago, wasn't even a great movie. I think Anything Works, not say anything, something with the word anything was in there. But at the end he said, your job on this earth is to pilfer any bit of happiness and joy out of it that you can. My belief is somewhere within that it's tough. You got to do the best you can to find some great connections, hopefully find someone you love, build a life and a home that you love, and put some good out there. And that, I don't think you need to believe in something that you can't prove to attain that.
Well, I would just say, all I would say to your audience, I actually see your show, and I think you have an audience of goodwill, which I really
And I have plenty of people of faith too, which I love.
Yeah. But all I would say to that is put it to what I call the toddler test. If you have a toddler, toddlers follow you around. They go, why, until you just want to punch them.
Yeah.
When you say, you should find what happiness you can, when you say that you should be good to people, when you say that, you ask yourself why. Because this is the question that really, if you don't know the answer to that, all the way down to the ground, when they come and tell you, really you should turn over your Jews, or we'll kill you, you don't know why you shouldn't. Why should you die? Why should why should a 20-year-old go and die to protect a constitution that he's never going to live to enjoy? Why should he do that? And yet if people don't do that, there are no constitutions, there are no free countries. And yet everybody knows it. Everybody knows, like every single person knows in his heart that is a noble act, to die for someone else. And yet, if there's no God, if there's no spirit, it's an insane act. And so all I'm saying...
But those principles could still be there without that leap of faith. Those principles are still there.
The principles can be there without your believing, but you just don't... They're just not making sense. What you're saying isn't making sense. I once saw Bill Maher.
If it's not making sense, I've really done a good number on myself.
Well, the thing is, if you put yourself through that toddler test, you will find that you run out of answers. And I don't find that. And I think, the funny thing is that for hundreds of years, for a couple of hundred years after Newton, atheism made sense. Atheism made sense. Scientifically, it has stopped making sense. And the way you can tell that it's stopped making sense is there used to be something called the God of the gaps. Have you ever heard of this expression?
No, I don't.
The God of the gaps was when scientists couldn't explain something the religious people go, aha, that's God, to fill in the gaps. So
Yeah.
they've got it. Now, there's science of the gaps. The world is created so exactly for human understanding, what they call the anthropic principle. It's created so much so that we can understand it, that scientists have had to invent multiple universes with no proof whatsoever. There's absolutely no proof whatsoever of multiple universes. They've had to invent it simply to explain away how things could be so exactly made for our benefit. It's science of the gaps. They made it up because they can't explain it without a creator. For a long time, atheism made sense. It has ceased to make sense. And the problem when things cease to make sense is not that you become a bad person, it's that you become vulnerable to attack. You become vulnerable to logical attack because you don't know what you believe or why. And that's my argument.
Yeah, and I think it's a great argument that I can't, shred while we're sitting here. Nor is that the intention of when I sit down with someone, of course, because I want to hear what you think.
Of course.
But one of the things I intend on doing over the next couple of months is doing more, debates, not the cable news scream debates, but get you in here with a guy like Lawrence Krauss, who I had on a few weeks ago, who's an astrophysicist who does operate often in that area of we don't know what, I'm just out there. It's theoretics, basically. So we should do some of these sit-downs and play some of that out, because I fear you would not be afraid of that that debate in any way.
No,
not necessarily with him. I mean, but in general,
I'm never afraid of a debate that is actually a search for truth. I worry about debates in which people are just trying to win.
Yeah, that's what almost all our debates have become, right?
Because people can't. I'm not interested, and so people can win, and yet that they're saying something illogical, and that's. But I'm never afraid to talk about things, because I think that's what it's all about. That's the other thing. We know, people keep trying to tell us that we're who we sleep with, or we're what we eat. We're what we believe. We're what we truly believe. And I think that's why the left is always attacking us in the realm of ideas, but leaving us free in the realm of the flesh. And I think, and the answer is not to do the opposite of that. I think people should be as free in the realm of the flesh as they can be without hurting me. Not so free that they can set my house on fire, but but free enough to walk down the street and be who they are. But most importantly, they should be free to see the world as they see it. This, for instance, is where when people say, somebody says I'm a woman, and therefore you have to call me she, and I think no, wait a minute. You can say whatever you want to say, but you can't tell me how to perceive the world, because that's infringing on who I truly am, my ideas and my truth.
Right. I mean, usually when I see a woman, I say she or her or whatever. Yeah. But now they have all these other things, and it's like, and that has become one of my main issue with the progressives, is that the second they decide you have to change, and you have to accept their new edict, if you don't change the day that they change, now you're the bigot and the homophobe and the racist and the sexist. Right. And that to me is a place where you will spin off into true chaos. Because who's going to stop them from change? What's next, and what's next, and what's next, and what's next?
And while I'm preaching, I
preach, you religious maniac.
Hallelujah. Yeah. And then I'll heal, and then I'll make you walk again.
Yeah.
But while I'm preaching, so much of that has to do with shame. In Christianity, they have this idea of original sin, which offends a lot of people, but it simply means you're not the person you should be. And there's a certain amount of shame. Like even Freud had to explain that. Freud had to make up a myth to explain this, the myth of the primal father who we killed, and now we all feel guilty. Because he had to explain why do people walk around feeling guilty all the time? The left wants to outlaw that. Because they think that if they can just stop this guy from hating you because you're transgender, then you'll feel great about being transgender. No, you won't. Once you realize that being a human being comes along with a certain amount of shame and guilt, you're free. Nobody has nobody.
It's an inside job.
It's an inside
that's
job.
The phrase
Exactly.
I like. It's an inside job.
That is a great answer.
I'm curious, and then we'll wrap up after this. But what about the stuff that people would say? All right, everything he said here, it sounded pretty solid. He has his own set of principles that he's living by, all good. But what about the stuff in the Bible and the New Testament that you can't take literally? I mean, do you take some of that stuff literally? Well,
here's where I always
where
I always get in trouble with Christian people. I believe every word of the Bible is true, but there are different genres for telling the truth. If I come in the door and I say there was a burning building out there and I ran in and I saved 2 children, that better be literally, physically, historically true. If I say
I thought you were going to say the building talked to you. That would be
but if I say to you, once upon a time, there were two children who were lost in the woods, you don't say like, when did this happen? What day was that? You know, there are different genres in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, the first books of Genesis, I believe are maybe the most profound writing ever done by human beings. I mean, so profound, such a perfect description that I don't think they were trying to describe something that they saw or something that they knew for certain. For most of the church's history, that was not taken literally. You know, it was not taken, oh, this is exactly what happened. It was taken as a statement of cosmic truth, which it is. It's a different genre than some of the historical writing. I think that doesn't mean that I don't believe in miracles, because I do, and I've seen some. You know, I think we've all seen them, actually, more than we think. You know, I do think that in order for Christianity to be true, the Gospels have to be the place where history and metaphor come together. And I think that and St. Paul says this, if the resurrection is not true, the whole thing is bogus. That's the point that says, here's the proof. Here's the proof. And, you know, I wasn't there. I certainly think it's very hard to argue there was no empty tomb. I don't think any historian can really argue that there was no empty tomb. People went out and died. They went into Jerusalem and to where people were there. Remember, the people were there. They saw what happened and said, the tomb is empty. Jesus was raised from the grave. Nobody said, well, wait, let's just go over to the tomb. You know, so there's evidence that this is true, but I think that that's the place where the rubber meets the road. But there's lots of stuff in the Bible that I take as legend and I take as a kind of writing that conveys. You simply can't convey every level of truth with historical writing. You can't do it. I'm a novelist. I tell stories that aren't true
Right.
to tell things
to
that
tell
are
the
true.
truth.
Yeah, and I think that there is a lot of that in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a fitting ending to me.
All right.
What do you think? We didn't have to bludgeon each other over the head.
No, but I kind of missed
The
that.
Bible's very violent. We didn't have to.
A lot of death.
We didn't have to do any of that.
A lot of sex too.
A lot of sex. We're not going to do that.
No.
We're both happily married. All right. Well, it was a pleasure talking
It's
to you.
been great
And we'll
talking
do
to you,
this
yeah.
again. I thought we had reached out to you like 6 months ago, but unless there's a ghost in the machine that deleted my emails, apparently we never did it. All right. Well, for more on Andrew and where to find his books and more of his work, check out andrewklavan.com. And the Andrew Klavan Show is right here on YouTube, so just stick it in the Google search thing right up above.